Hi guys, and welcome back to Tech Tips. Today I've got my handycam ready for the simple reason that I was at the field the other day, and to my shock I noticed that people just took their choppers out and flew. And I asked them, who of you guys actually do a pre-flight check, and nobody answered me. So I figured that maybe it's a question of that nobody knows how to do a pre-flight check. Now, unfortunately, due to time constraints, I cannot do the entire check as properly, but I want to show you just briefly the things that you should go through in general. I'm going to be working on the one side of the chopper, so I'm not going to do the other side, but just remember you have to do both sides. When you start with your pre-flight check, a good thing to remember is always to start from one direction forwards. Okay, so what I normally do is I start with the tail section. Okay, now the helicopter in general has got a lot of moving parts, and each moving part needs to be checked. Each frame needs to be checked. Okay, so let's take the tail rotor for example. Okay, if I zoom in a little bit, okay, now you can see that the tail rotor consists of a whole bunch of screws and nuts and bolts. Okay, all these needs to be checked. So when you check them, all needs to be nice and tight. Okay, when you move down to your blades, the entire blade needs to be checked, as I showed you in the video clip about how to check your heli after a crash. Okay, so once you've checked all the nuts and bolts, and this includes checking that the rotor blade is nice and firmly attached, don't forget to check all the little sliders. Okay, as you can see, there's plenty of things that you need to check, and each and every nut and bolt you need to check, even the grub screws and the holding screws on the rotor grip itself. Okay, and then also on the tail casing, as you can see, there's screws there as well. So those screws also needs to be checked, and a nice place to check the belt tension is here. Okay, inside there, it's nice. So as you go around, all these screws needs to be checked. Okay, so the idea basically is that before you fly, you need to check that everything is nice and tight. Okay, now the other thing that you need to check as well is that the tail rotor actually needs to move nice and smoothly, no sticking of any kind. Okay, so as you check the fixtures, don't forget to check the movement as well. All right. The other thing that generally is not checked on the chopper is this bolt here. Okay, this is quite an important bolt because this bolt keeps the entire tail casing section onto the tail boom. So always make sure that these bolts is nice and fastened. You can see that the bolt, it's a locking bolt. Okay, now the bolt might sit on different places on different choppers, but there we go. Okay, right, the next thing that we generally check is the is my chopper bent check, is what I call. Okay, so you go through and you see whether your tail boom is nice and straight, no dents, no bruises as I say, and everything is nice and tight. The screws and everything is tight for the tail boom support. Your control rod doesn't stick as it goes through. Another thing is worn control rods. Okay, so let's just very briefly going through here now. Right, with the servos, what you got to do is check that nothing is loose. Okay, that the link cannot come out, for instance, that the servo is mounted properly, that it's actually got the vibration dampers are actually working. Especially with the tail servo, these vibration dampers are very important. Okay, another thing that people generally forget to check, oopsie daisy, is that screw in the center of the servo. That screw is very important. Always make sure that those screws are right. Okay, so as you can see, I work from a side forward. Right, so let's go further down. Generally people don't check this, but you need to rotate your gear and see that there's no teeth missing. I'm talking about the auto rotation gear as well as the main drive gear. Okay, always check that your wiring, always check your wiring is neat, that all your peripherals are properly attached, like make sure your receivers are in. Another thing that people don't generally check is make sure that your gyro is actually firmly on the rubber. As you can see, I've got a remote receiver on top here. Okay, and I can check my wiring. So as you see, you go through that. Okay, then once again with the servos, you check your links, you check your screw, you check that your dampers are in place, okay, and you check that everything is nice and tight, okay, and that you've got nice free movement. Okay, check your servo. You can hear there's no binding or grinding gears. And as you go up into the rotor head, you normally just check all the little links. Okay, as you can see, I work from away upwards. Okay, don't forget to check that little bearing as well as the play in your rotor head. Your anti-rotation lock, which is very important. Okay, so as you can see, I work from a direction. I work up. I check all the links. Okay, make sure that everything moves nice and smoothly, and as you go up to your rotor blades, make sure there's no excessive play, etc, etc. Make sure your rotor blade is on the correct tension, and then also check your blade as I did in checking your heli. So as you can see, basically the pre-flight check is a general check on the helicopter to make sure that everything is good. Okay, now the next part I want to show you, I'm going to require my remote for that, is just quickly show you that you need to check the travels and everything like that. So let me just get my remote out and then we'll talk again. Right, the next part of your pre-flight check, after you've checked all the mechanical stuff, is actually to make sure, number one, that your gyro has initialized properly. Okay, I know that on the 520, that means that the gyro has been initialized properly. Okay, now as you can see, alongside with that, I make sure that my gyro, or that my tail, moves unobstructedly. Okay, that's quite important, especially on a heli. The tail must be able to move unrestricted. Okay, the next thing that you check, that people generally don't check, is that the gyro actually work. Okay, you check that by, if you should move the helicopter's tail to the right, the blade, the front of the rotor blade should move to the left and vice versa. Okay, right, the next thing that you check is the movement on the actual servos. In other words, if you push forward forward stick, you see that the swash blade moves forward, backwards is backward. So you check your control directions and all the rest of it. Okay, so this is actually quite important, because if it's on the wrong setting, then obviously it's going to be a bit of a problem. Okay, you're going to push forward stick and the chopper will move backwards. Okay, so always check forward, backward, left, right. Okay, right, and also check your pitches. So if you open your throttle and the pitch goes forward, that the actual blade pitches up, and down, that it pitches down. Okay, so these are basically the things that needs to be checked before every flight. The other thing that needs to be checked, this is a battery chopper, but the other thing needs to be checked is that the battery is nice and secure and it actually cannot come loose. I have a receiver battery here in the bottom, and I always check the same there as well. I check that the wires on my speed controller cannot come loose, and so forth. Just on the petrol chopper, don't forget to check your fuel tank and your piping and your clunk, as well as your engine mountings. Okay, the last thing you would want on a petrol chopper is an auto rotation, a forced auto rotation. Okay, so guys, this is basically the way you go about checking your helicopter for a pre-flight. Take your time when you do a pre-flight. Do it properly, because somebody's life can depend on whether your chopper is capable of flying properly. Okay, so hopefully next time you're at the field, you'll be able to show the guys and say, hey guys, come, let's do a chopper pre-flight, and then you can be proud to be able to show them precisely how to do one. Cheers for now. Take